We're looking tonight at the last of the Midos within the week of Netzach, Malchut, ShebeNetzach, royalty, kingship within Netzach. And as we've seen, Malchus, as the Ramchal says, is the Shoresh Kol HaNivraim. It's the root of all of creation. It's the principle of existence in which there is a lower reality. There's an Olam Hagashmi which exists. That's called Malchus. And he says, "V'hu kashar kol hakochos hanimtzayim b'chol hasfiros lahotzi hatachtonim." It is that which binds together all of the midos, all of the kochos which exist amongst the spheros, and actually manifests them in the world. And as the Ramchal says, when you understand all of the concepts and the ideas down below in this world, so ata tevinehu lamala, then you now come to understand it up above. And so we saw that the concept of Malchus is essentially that every detail of creation is expressing every facet of Hashem's desire to create, of that first ratzon of the Ein Sof, and that all of it comes together in being Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all a Gilui Kvod Shamayim. And kind of for that reason that in Kabbalistic writing, in the Zohar, it comes up all the time, that Malchus corresponds with the peh, corresponds with the mouth of a person. That the idea of Malchus is to articulate and to bring into reality, just as the faculty of speech brings into reality the pool of potential which exists within thought. Malchus is the mouth which allows manifestation, concrete physical actualization of Hashem's will into the world. And it's also, interestingly enough, corresponds with Torah Sheba'al Peh, as the Zohar says, the Tikkun Zohar, but it's all over the place. Often you'll see in many Sfarim, Reb Tzadok and the Baal Tanya, and they'll always refer to Malchus as Malchus Peh Torah Sheba'al Peh, like the three of terms all together. And that's from this line in the Zohar over here, which I quoted on the source sheets. And that's because Torah Sheba'al Peh brings to life the stagnant text of the Torah Shebichsav. So whereas in the Torah Shebichsav you have the ideas, the thoughts, right? As the Gemara says, the Anochi is Ana Nafshai K'tiva Yahavit, that Hashem poured over His essence, so to speak, to borrow human terms. Hashem pours His soul, what's inside, into the Torah Shebichsav. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is where the Torah comes alive and becomes articulated and actually delivered into an applicable format for the human condition, right? Whereas Torah Shebichsav is entirely abstract, it's entirely in principle. Torah Sheba'al Peh brings it into the lives, and as the Torah says, Beficha vilvavcha lasoso, it's mamish in your mouth, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. It lives within, the sphere that you occupy. And so that's why Rav Kook, when he's writing about the power of human thought and speech, Rav Kook writes that machshava is the hisgalus hanitzchis asher la'adam. Thought itself is the revelation of eternality within a person. Shebehadibur himitgaleh, which comes to expression through the faculty of speech. And he goes on to say that it expresses essentially the value and power which exists within the human condition. And he goes on to explain that relative to the value in which is expressed in one's speech, the more degree to which you are drawing from the creative forces that Hashem imbued into the world, and that's why it's so important to utilize speech properly. It's a really important aspect of being a good person. That's why the Rambam in Tag Hilchos Deos, half the chapter about Talmidei Chachamim is that benachas, same dvarim, that their words are spoken calmly. Siag l'chachma is shtika. The whole idea of being a great person, to a large degree, revolves around their utilization of speech, the way in which they actualize thoughts into the world, that they bring to fruition the ideas that exist within the pool of potential of their mind. So this is all just about kind of Malchus in general. And it's for this reason, by the way, that the Gemara refers to Man Malchei Rabbanan, that the Rabbanan, or at least one aspect, why the Gemara calls the Talmidei Chachamim Malachim, because Malchus, in one aspect of Malchus, is the correct utilization of one's speech, the ability to properly articulate and bring into reality the ideas which you conceive and which you find yourself inspired with. And that's part of the leadership of a melech as well, to be able to bring to fruition the ideals and vision of the Malchus. So when we're dealing with Malchut ShebeNetzach, kingship, monarchy, royalty within eternal value, within the endless conquest and fight for eternality. We're talking about how each and every detail of a person's fight for value should be expressive of the Kvod Shamayim, should be expressive of the Malchut of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we've quoted in the past, as we say in Aleinu, that the idea is L'takin Olam b'Malchus Shakai, to rectify the entire world under the sovereignty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that a person's fight should be, and they're seeking out values, should be as far as being Megale the Kvod Shamayim. And it's through Netzach, which is the aspect of Torah, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, that this Malchus is most expressed. And that's why the Gemara in Brachos talks about that when the Rabbanan would leave the academy of Rabbi Ami, some say it was the academy of Rabbi Chanina, that they would talk about Olam Haba right there at that point. That as the Malachim, the Rabbanan, would be leaving a session of Torah study, and they had brought light to the world by means of their explorations and chidushim. So what they would say to each other was, Olamcha tireh b'chayecha. You should see your world during your lifetime. It's a very cryptic type of phrase to say. Olamcha tireh b'chayecha. You should see your world in your lifetime. Rashi takes the Pashut Pshat approach, which is that you should have all of your needs met. It doesn't really speak to what the words are implying. Olamcha tireh b'chayecha seems to be saying you should see your world, as they continue to say, v'acharitcha l'chayei olam haba. And not only should you see your world in your lifetime, but your end, your conclusion, should be to a life in the world to come. V'tikvatcha l'dor dorim, and your hope, your direct line to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should be for all generations. And so they would give this beautiful, and it goes on and on, it's really an incredible, if we would say this blessing to one another after we finish learning, the Mashiach would come. It's quite simple. It's an unbelievable type of, you really have to be vulnerable and honest to say such a bracha with a full heart. You can't say such words without a full heart. And we would really bring the redemption if we would do so. So this idea that Malchut ShebeNetzach is calling upon is that Talmidei Chachamim express the Kvod Shamayim in everything that they do, and the Torah that they fight for, that they're involved in that Milchemta Shel Torah, is expressed in a very famous Gemara, Bava Metzia, just one daf, one amud ahead from the Gemara Jacob just shared with us, where the Gemara famously talks about the Tanur Shel Achnai, right? The oven that's shaped in a spiral, and the famous machloket that happened back and forth between Rabbi Yoshua and all the other Rabbanim. And so at the end of the story, when they're going back and forth and all the miracles are happening, so after the bat kol comes out resonating from Shemayim saying the halacha is like him, so Rabbi Yoshua gets up and he says, that the halacha had been like Rabbi Lazar. So Rabbi Yoshua gets up and he says, Lo b'Shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven. It's not there. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Shekvar nitna Torah me'ar Sinai, einanu mashgichim b'vatko. The Torah was given down here. The world is where the Torah is. It's not up there anymore. Malchut is where it's descended onto earth. The Malchut of Hashem is not up there. It's ein melech bli am. The am is down here. So Hashem's Malchus exists on the physical grounds. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Nassan was traveling along and he found Eliyahu Hanavi. And he asked Eliyahu, he said, Ma avid kuchavrichu bahu shaita. What was Hashem doing at that moment? When Rabbi Yoshua got up on his feet and he screamed out, Lo b'Shamayim hi. We're not accepting that bat kol. What was Hashem up to at that moment, Eliyahu? Give us the inside scoop, right? So Eliyahu turns to him and he says, what he was doing at that moment, he was laughing. And he was saying to himself, Nitzchuni banai. Nitzchuni banai. Oh, my children, they've been victorious over me. Oh, those kids, they're great. What's the idea over there? What's this lashon of Nitzchuni banai? Hashem is being moda to the fact that the whole notion of being menatseach in the milchama of Hashem, in the milchemta shel Torah, is to successfully transplant Torah from heaven onto earth. To bring down the Kvod Shamayim, that it's no longer up there. It's here. This is the makom. This is the place of the Shechina. Hashem Shechina comes to rest. Sefer Vayikra. Hashem Shechina comes to rest in the Mishkan. You think, Hashem, wow, this incredible world. You think that this Mishkan, he can fit in there? Says Hashem, yeah, it's not only the Mishkan. I actually fit just between the Badei Akruvim. I'm just right over there in this tiny spot. Hashem's presence rests in this world. And at the moment that the Talmidei Chachamim had fought hard enough, with enough clarity, with enough conviction, to know that the Torah resides amongst the Jewish people, that it's the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is going to govern how the Torah Shebichtav is applied. As soon as they recognized that, Hashem said, they've been Menatzeach. They've won. They've been victorious in the war of being Megala Kvod Shamayim on the Aretz. And this is really the essence of Malchut ShebeNetzach. And so this comes up a few times in the Gemara. The Gemara says that at the end of Pesachim, Kuf Yud Tesvav Beis, says that every time in Tehillim that we say Lamanatseach Mizmor LeDavid, when we say, which usually they translate in the art scrolls, in the Steinsaltz, to the conductor, the Menatseach, the one who's conducting. And this was because Tehillim were musical arrangements, and this was kind of called out to the conductor. The Gemara says, no, that's not what it's... I mean, maybe that's one layer, but that's not what's going on, Lamanatseach. Says the Gemara in Pesachim, Lamanatseach. What does it mean, Lamanatseach, Mizmor LeDavid? Zamru lemi shenotzchim oto v'sameach. Let us sing to he who is victorious upon and rejoices. Let us sing to the one who is beaten in war, so to speak, and rejoices when it happens. And he goes on and explains that Hashem's not like us frail human beings. A human being, you get beaten out, someone's victorious over you, and you're depressed. What Hashem allows us to be victorious, and He rejoices over that opportunity. And it brings the raya from Moshe Rabbeinu, where Moshe Rabbeinu fought that battle against Hashem at the moment of the Egel, where Hashem was saying, Hanicha, let me be, and I'm going to go and wipe out these Jews, which is effectively calling on Moshe. Like if you turn to somebody and say, hold me back, or otherwise I'm going to beat this guy up. What you're saying is, I'm giving you an opening. Like, you have an opportunity now to jump in. You don't have to tell me to hold you back, unless you kind of want me to jump in and be a part of the battle. So what Hashem did with Moshe, he said, just let me be, Moshe. Stop holding me back, because otherwise I'm going to go in there and destroy these people. And Moshe's like, wait a second. There's an opportunity to jump in to save the Jewish people. He dives in. And when David HaMelech is reflecting on this in Tehillim, he talks about it and he says, Hashmideim, I was going to wipe them out. Lulei Moshe b'chiro omad b'peretz lefanav. If not for the fact that Moshe, my chosen one, stood in the breach before them, and averted God's wrath, so to speak, from the Jewish people, and bought them another opportunity to continue on in the Midbar towards Eretz Yisrael. So that ultimately the opportunity for Netzach is the opportunity to stand in for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Malchus into the realm of humanity, and that our primary orientation in our fight for value, for eternality, should not only be, as we saw yesterday, to be a channel towards Hashem's expression in the world, but to allow each and every moment to be a victory for the entire purpose of Ma'aseh Bereishis that the Malachim had argued about when they said, T'nah hotcha l'shamayim. And Moshe had to successfully argue with them and say, Torah is meant for humanity. And as David HaMelech talks about, V'tishlach emet arza, that truth was thrown down to the world. That a beautiful medrash talks about how there was a debate between all of the different Middot and Shamayim about whether the world should be created or not. And while they were all arguing, Hashem just grabbed reality and threw it down to planet Earth so they could all just duke it out and figure it out on their own. And the idea, again, if Malchut ShebeNetzach it's really very intimate. It's a very powerful responsibility, because what it tells us is that to fight the fight for value is to bring God's presence into the world, is to actualize the purpose of creation. And it's not only to be that funnel, but to allow the entire world to light up in the orchestra of Hashem's incredible symphony of the entire physical world, and allowing each and every one of Hashem's aspects of love that He grants to creation, which is all embedded in that original Ratzon, to come to light in the human condition, in our human society, in the way that we speak and communicate and articulate Torah outwards, and as we spread that light from ourselves, from our thoughts, and we allow it to kind of coalesce into language, we allow in the same way that Hashem's thoughts that was B'tchila Allah b'machshavto, the way that He desired to create the world, we allow it to come to fruition and come into the desired outcome that He had in mind from the Sof Ma'aseh b'machshava Techila that Hashem was looking for and dreaming about from the beginnings of time. And so these are some thoughts from Malchut ShebeNetzach. Let us take upon this battle for value. Let us utilize every moment to be Marbeh Kvod Shamayim, to bring together all of the Midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to find within ourselves the opportunities and the insight, the clarity, to see our own worlds in our own lifetimes, to be Zocha to Olam Haba, to have, as the Gemara continues over there, that our hearts should be constantly seeking understanding, our mouths should be speaking wisdom, our tongues should be whispering praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in doing that, Mirz Hashem will be Zocha to experience the ultimate L'taken Olam b'Malchus Shakai, to experience that Malchus in its full Gilui in the Yemot HaMashiach, in the final Malchut, where Hashem's Emes is truly and finally and permanently planted in our physical world. We should be Zocha to see that very soon. We should be Zocha to be in the Beis HaMikdash this Shavuos, bringing our Karbanos all together, Kol Yisrael Chaverim, and we're going to wrap it up over there.